I'm so much angrier when I'm sad, when I'm worried about something and I'm not talking about it. It really, I think, almost always comes out as anger. And I don't mean for it to, and it breaks my heart that that's what happens, but it happens.
Welcome to Family Life Today, where we want to help you pursue the relationships that matter most. I'm Shelby Abbott, and your hosts are Dave and Ann Wilson. You can find us at FamilyLifeToday.com.
This is Family Life Today. So how many nights do you think you could not sleep as a parent? Even as a grandparent, how many sleepless nights?
I'm sad to say so many. When they were little, I would fall asleep thinking of all the things I did wrong that day. When they were teens, I would fall asleep wondering what things they could be doing wrong. And now with adult kids, now I fall asleep recounting and worrying over all the things I did do wrong while they were growing up and how it might be affecting them today. Isn't that terrible? Do you worry about anything?
Yeah, I worry about money. I mean, when I think about sleepless nights, it's usually connected to, back then it was paying for college, preparing them for the future. Now it's grandkids and how much money we're spending at Christmas.
You mean how much money I'm spending on them?
I didn't want to say it that way.
That's good.
I'm glad you spent something because I don't think I'd spend anything. But anyway, we're here to talk with Sissy Goff about parents that worry, because that's us, and I think that's almost every parent.
I would guess every listener has something they worry about.
And can relate to exactly what you said.
Do you think so?
Yes. And it makes me sad. I didn't know you back then.
You could have helped me.
Helped somehow.
You could have helped me. Well, you're going to help me today. You're
Okay.
going to help a lot of people. Your new book is called The Worry-Free Parent. And I like the subtitle because it's called Living in Confidence So Your Kids Can Too. And that's what we want, Sissy.
That's what we want.
Share with our listeners a little bit. You've been on before.
Yes.
You've written several books, but share a little bit about what you do.
So on a daily basis, I'm counseling out of a little yellow house. It's not so little anymore, I shouldn't say, but we have a white picket fence in the middle of Nashville, Tennessee, where we have currently, I think, 2,000 families that are in counseling.
Wow.
With 13 of us, 13 adult human staff members, counselors, and we have 5 dogs on staff who are so many of the kids' favorite therapists. And it's just a really sweet place and community to get to work every day. And 30 years there. And out of that, I get to write and speak and podcast and some of those things. And
I told Sissy this already, Dave, but I told her that the last time she was on, I told our daughter-in-law and son about your material. And so she started going through it with her then 7-year-old, our granddaughter. And one of the things that Olive said was, I wish I could go to the yellow house with the picket fence and meet this lady. I thought that was the sweetest
Maybe
thing.
someday you'll have to take her.
I want to meet her.
It's so sweet because she said that because your material helped her so much. And what was your last book called?
The one for her age was called Braver, Stronger, Smarter.
Yeah.
Because girls are twice as likely as boys to deal with anxiety, although boys are taken in for help more, which is fascinating to me. And the average age of onset used to be 8, and now we're seeing it drop to 7.
Wow.
With signs really much younger than that.
So why this book? This time you're in the parents' world.
I know. I've never done this before. I mean, I've obviously written a lot of books for parents, but it's always been about their kids. I'm sitting with 2 types of parents a lot. One is parents who say, when I say, tell me about your family history, and even when you sit with somebody really anxious, it's palpable in the room. You can start to kind of absorb it yourself. I'll even sit with parents that I can tell they're really anxious, and I'll say, well, tell me about your family history. And they'll say, well, I don't have a clue. And they haven't been in counseling. Their parents weren't in counseling. They haven't been talking about feelings. And as much as they want to help their kids, they don't understand themselves. And so I think wanting to help those parents, certainly. And I think it comes out in ways when we don't understand it, when we don't do the work, it comes out sideways. And kids do start to absorb it, even though we would never intend for them to. And then the parents who do say, I'm really anxious and I'm aware of it, and I think I'm making things harder for them, help. And so it was really for all of those parents that I thought, I'm ready to, I don't want to say go to the source, because if you're anxious, that's always the source. But I think go to the source in that the biggest agent of change in your child's life is not someone like me as a therapist. It's you as a parent. And so if you can do the work and even do the work in front of them, where they're watching you, hearing you. We talk all the time about kids learn more from observation than information. So when they're watching you do the work, it normalizes it for them. It helps their understanding of grace, even if my parents fail too, and I can do that, and I'm okay, because kids and parents are such perfectionists right now. I've never seen it as rampant as it is today.
So you're seeing it more than ever.
More than ever. Really in the last 2 to 3 years.
And Dave, you'll probably have something too on this, but when you say let your kids see you do the work.
Yes.
What do you mean? What's that look like?
Well, I think it's the difference between feeling your feelings and doing your work. And really with anxiety, I think talking about our feelings is so important, because one of the things I've learned over the years that is really interesting to me is, I don't know how many thousands of kids I've seen now who have anxiety, but they have a few things in common. My guess is this is true about Olive. They're really bright. They're really conscientious. They try so hard. They care so much. It's these beautiful parts of who God made them to be. And it's hard to turn the volume down on all the caring. The same is true for parents. Anxious parents are trying so hard to get it right. I had a mom say to me, it's like I'm trying so hard to be a good parent that I'm not even parenting. And I think it feels like that so much of the time. And so doing the work is starting to acknowledge our feelings. And when we're not doing that, I think all of our feelings kind of morph into anxiety. That's how it lives in our bodies, because we're trying hard and being kind and doing all those things. We're not saying, hey, that made me angry, or I felt disappointed when, and neither are kids, which is why anxious kids are so compliant and sweet until they're at home, and then they explode at home. But that's part of the deal, is because they're trying so hard. And so I think when we can talk about, share feelings together, not process our feelings in front of them where they're hearing all the ins and outs, but we can say, I felt sad today when blank happened, and then we keep moving. That's a part of it. And then when we can use healthy coping strategies in front of them. You know, I felt really sad today, and so I needed to go write in my journal, or I started to feel worried, and I talked back to that worry monster, and I told him to leave me alone because I'm capable of doing this.
Oh, that's good.
Because, we didn't grow up with parents who were talking about feelings, certainly modeling healthy coping strategies, and how different our lives would have been, if we had. And so what a gift to those kids in their life today, and in their marriages, and in their own parenting, and their own relationships as they move forward.
That's such good advice. I think so often as a parent, especially as a man, as a dad, we don't want to get in touch with our feelings. Some guys are listening going, I'm not going to bring up I was worried today, or I felt sad today at work. I just deal with it internally, and we think we're dealing with it, and we're not. One of the things that jumped off the page of your book immediately to me, because you break it into the past, the present, and the future, is how if I'm a worried parent, my kids, I think it was 7 times more likely to be worried kids.
Yes.
So that's scary. We got to do the work.
I know.
You know what, Sissy? This was so sad. I haven't even told my son this, but our youngest son was preaching at a church a couple Sundays ago. And he said some really nice things about it. It was about legacy, but he did say, when I got in my car to leave and travel across the country to go to this new school, and this was me, because I said it. He said, my parents said, be careful. And I said that, be careful, hun. And he said, you know what I wanted her to say? He didn't say she. I knew it was me because I'm the one that did this. I wanted her to say, you got this. You're going to kill it. You're going to be amazing. I've been thinking about it for the last 2 weeks. But how many times as parents are we warning our kids, be careful, be careful. Yes. Instead of, he said, somebody else had told them, man, you are really good. You got this. Dave, you probably have done that way more than I have. But I'm like, what's in me that's, the older I get, sometimes I think it's worse now.
Yes.
And so I've thought that would have been a gift that we could give to our kids to say, man, you've got this. I'm so confident in you. Do you think
that's beautiful?
Do you think other parents feel that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I have a friend who said, I wish when I was growing up, my mom had said, you got this, more than let me get this for you. So it's both that. I think we're not speaking fear. That's not what that is. You're cautious.
Yeah.
And of course you care. This is the most important thing in the world to you. And so you want him to be careful.
But he hears it as, I don't know if you can do it, so watch out for everything.
Right. Yes. And I think it's worth noting that when you started that sentence, you said, he said some really sweet things about the legacy. And that's what's been after you for days since.
Yeah, that's that
The
inner
one
part of me
negative.
that wants to get better. Like,
Yes. And that we're so critical of ourselves. I think that's part of what's going on for parents today.
she's analyzing me now.
No,
and I love it.
I'm not. It just
I
made me
actually love it.
sad because I thought, I wanted to hear the things you did right. But we
she
don't. We
did.
stay with the things we
That's-
do wrong.
I know.
And it makes us more anxious.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, if I think anybody that was great at, let's talk about our feelings, I'm looking at her. You
I
were
feel confident.
phenomenal. Where, again, some of it's processing my family of origin brokenness, but, 2 alcoholic parents and a divorce and then the death of my brother all in like 1 year when I was 7 years old.
Yes.
We never, ever talked about it. Even my little brother died, my best friend, and I don't think we had a conversation.
So sorry.
And so, Ann and I get married and conflict happens and I tend to pull away. Again, I'm never connecting these dots. But she was like, we got to talk. And then as we were raising our boys, like, we got to teach them how to do that. But how does a parent that was sort of like me, that didn't walk that road, didn't have that journey, now he's a dad and he's hearing somebody like you who's an expert saying, you got to talk about your feelings. You got to process these and help your kids do that. How do we start? Because first of all, we're scared. Second, we're like, I've never done this. I'm not sure what to do. I'm just going to go watch the game.
Yes.
And it's just total
It's
escapism, right? But that's where a lot of parents live rather than going, okay, I got to have it. Is it courage? Because part of it's like, I got to have the courage to say, I'm going to step into somewhere. I don't know where it's going to go. I've never done this before, but I know it's the right thing to do. Is that where we start? I mean, how do we start?
I think I would definitely say courage. It takes a lot of courage to start to talk about our feelings. I did not talk about my feelings at all until I was 22 and my parents divorced and I moved to Nashville and got in counseling for the first time. And I remember feeling like someone, I don't know, took off all of my skin and it just
You feel
awful.
exposed?
Yes, it's awful when you start, but it's so good. Part of what I want this book to be is when you're not talking about it, there are secrets inside of you. Shame might be a better word for the ways that those feelings are impacting you. Not that this was true about you, but I'm hearing more parents talk about losing it with their kids than I've ever heard, getting really angry. And I'm so grateful that they can behind the closed confidential doors of a counseling office. So much of that is because we never talked about our feelings. And so it comes out as anger. And I'm trying to say to worried parents as much as I can, you're angry, not because you're a bad parent, but because you're worried, you're anxious. Like you're screaming, trying to get out of the door at your kids on the way to school because you realize he's already had 4 tardies. The 5th tardy means he has to go to Saturday school. There's a birthday party. And so you find yourself screaming because you want good for him. But the delivery's off, and so we've got to back up and do something different. I just feel like parents have more shame than ever before. And I really believe when we can talk about our feelings in healthy, appropriate ways, we're preventing anger. We're preventing us from having this anxiety that then makes us say, be careful, or stepping in and fixing it for them. So if for no other reason you would do the work, then you don't want your kids to experience what happens when you're not processing your emotions. I had a mom one time who told her daughter, either you process your feelings or your feelings will process you.
That's good.
I know. And that's what we're talking about. I'm so much angrier when I'm sad, when I'm worried about something and I'm not talking about it. It really, I think, almost always comes out as anger. And I don't mean for it to, and it breaks my heart that that's what happens, but it happens.
I'm thinking about when our kids were little and I was yelling and I thought, I've never yelled in my life.
Yes.
When that goes off, when you get angry, should that be like an alarm going off?
Yes.
Like go deeper, check down inside?
That's a beautiful way to say that.
I mean,
something more is happening.
It was back in that same time, but I was fixing our dryer. And this is in a slab basement, not finished, it was a rec room where we had balls hanging and ropes hanging from anyway, and I'm a Mr. Cheapo. So I'm like, I'm not hiring some dude. I can figure this out. So I have the whole dryer torn apart. I'm laying underneath, lint everywhere. And I was reattaching this belt, and I'm all proud that I can do this, right?
I was about to say, I'm impressed.
Yeah, and so I'm laying in there, and I have this Phillips head screwdriver, and I'm just trying to get this little screw way in the back of the dryer. And CJ, our oldest, how old? 6 years old, maybe?
Probably maybe 4.
Yeah, he's very little, comes down, and he, to this day, is an engineer. He works in the IT world, wired that way. So he's like, Dad, can I help? Yeah, man, get down here. So he's literally laying in this lint. We're both horizontal on this slab floor. And he reaches in, and I say, here, just take this, so he's trying to screw it in, but, he's just not coordinated enough, couldn't really reach it. But I had this thought in the moment, because I put my hand around his, and I had this thought, this is this beautiful moment. Dad's big, manly hand, little boy's hand. I never had this as, with my dad. I've never had that moment. This next second, Sissy, I go from this tender moment to he's trying to do it and the screwdriver keeps going off the thing. And I'm like, CJ. Next thing I know, I'm like really angry. And I'm like sort of grabbing it out of there. And all I know is I finish the job and I feel this little body get up and go up the steps. And I'm laying there. It was like this epiphany. I'm like, my anger just pushed away a 5-year-old. And I remember laying there going, I've got to find out what the source of this is.
Wow.
And it was that moment. It's like, I didn't realize I'm giving a gift to my child if I do this.
Incredible gift.
But it wasn't, I was frustrated with a screwdriver.
Yeah.
It was deeper. It was connected. I say it's like it's plugged in. And you say in your book, one of your takeaways, if we don't deal with our stuff, it'll pass on. If we do deal with our stuff, you say it's one of the greatest gifts we can give our kids.
Absolutely is.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, that is exactly what I'm talking about. That is a beautiful picture.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't that day.
I love these takeaways. You have a lot of worry-free takeaways in your book. Tell us about this. All of us need to hear truth, but especially those of us who worry. What's that mean?
Well, I mean, one of the things from a cognitive behavioral therapy standpoint, which is kind of the gold standard for working with anxiety, is I think in the secular world, we would call them mantras. We can still call them mantras for sure, but we would have sayings that we go back to, that we say to ourselves over and over. That's kind of something we anchor ourselves to. And I think when we can do that with truth, when we can do that with scripture, it's not only anchoring ourselves to something, but it transforms us. And the importance of that is because what happens, I'm going to get sciencey for a minute, y'all, okay?
This.
Do it.
When we get anxious, I feel like we probably talked about this last time I was here, our brain, literally the blood flow in our brain shifts, and it leaves the prefrontal cortex, which helps us think rationally and manage our emotions, and it goes to the amygdala. That's the fight or flight region of our brain, which is why you're having trouble with the screwdriver and all of a sudden you find yourself really frustrated and yelling. And so you move into fight or you move into flight, whichever, and sometimes freeze. And when we can slow our bodies back down, when we can calm ourselves down, and truth is one of the ways we want to do that, our blood vessels dilate again, shifts the blood flow back to the prefrontal cortex, and we can get to a rational place. But we've got to calm our bodies down first. But what happens is we've developed these well-worn pathways in our brain, these neural pathways. So the more often the amygdala gets triggered, the more likely it is to get triggered. It actually enlarges and develops a hair trigger response. So it's like a faulty alarm system in your house. You don't know when to trust it. And so the same is true for our brains, and it starts to lie to us. And worry makes us perceive problems that aren't even there. Makes us feel like, I wonder if he could get in a car accident driving across the country to or maybe somebody's not going to be kind to him in his new church. Or maybe, we start to forecast all the things that we feel like might go wrong because literally our brain has changed.
Oh, that's a good way to say it too. We start to forecast.
Yes.
We create this whole scenario of what could happen.
Exactly. Yeah.
Let me ask you, as a listener, how would they know if they have anxiety? They're like, I don't think I have it. What are the signs, symptoms?
I have a whole series of questions in the beginning of the book about, are your shoulders hunched up around your neck? Do you find yourself having these intrusive thoughts? So anxiety really can take two pathways. One is through the amygdala, and that type of anxiety is just lightning strikes and we think it hit my house. You know, it's something that just happens in a fraction of a second. And it impacts our bodies first. But there's also cortex-based anxiety. With the cortex, we really think ourselves into a more fearful space. And so I'm laying in bed and I hear something and I think, well, that sounded weird. I think that was a man outside my house. Oh, no, I think he's on my porch. And then all of a sudden you have this whole scenario that you've created and you actually have used your cortex, the thinking part of your brain, to scare your amygdala. And so now your thoughts are on board and your body's on board. So it impacts us in both places. But I think if you regularly feel like you're having headaches or tummy aches and you don't know why, you feel like your body's tense in a lot of moments. After I've been anxious, my legs are tired. Like I've been running, which is fascinating.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it just impacts all of us different ways. Or if you have, I mean, one of the primary ways I think we recognize it are with kids, I call it the one loop roller coaster at the fair. If you have thoughts that are worst case scenario thoughts, I really failed in that thoughts. If we have anxiety, the thought comes in and it is an intrusive thought. If we don't have anxiety, the thought comes in and it goes right back out. If we're anxious, the thought comes in and it goes around and around and around. And I think part of the danger of parenting is we feel like we're helping. Or we feel like we're problem solving when you're laying in bed thinking through all those things without realizing I'm just looping and it's only making me feel worse.
I think the first time I realized that when my sister was diagnosed with lung cancer. And in the past, I had always done that. I was always looping. What am I going to do? What's the plan? What should we do in the future? And I remember at one point, as the scripture talks about taking your thoughts captive, and even Romans 12:2 of not being conformed by the world, but being transformed by the renewing of our minds. I remember thinking, it's not doing any good. The more I cycle around this, it's not helping. And so I remember in my mind handing all of it to Jesus, just a picture in my mind. Here, Lord, I just can't carry it anymore. And it was the first time I began deciding purposely, I will not think about that because it's not doing any good. It's the first time I ever got off the roller coaster.
Way to go. That's beautiful.
Really?
Yes.
I did something. High fives.
Yes.
Yeah, I feel like you do that quite a bit.
I think that was the beginning of the process of learning not to, because I thought it was thinking ahead and planning before. What I realized is, no, this worry's doing nothing good for me.
And that's where I love that idea of taking thoughts captive and that you were doing that you were thinking, I'm not going to think this thought anymore. And then we need to replace it.
Oh, that's good. How do you do that?
Well, truth. I mean, I think we can have a scripture. Yes, I love breath prayers where we could say, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And we start with, I can do all things as we breathe in slowly and then breathe out through Christ who strengthens me. You know, whatever verse we want to pick, we breathe in and say the first half and breathe out and say the second half. Anything like that, again, we're calming our bodies so our amygdala is getting offline in a good way. We're getting our thinking brain back online and we're anchoring ourselves to truth. Or I think even flipping the thought and thinking, I just yelled at my son trying to get out of the door because I'm a good parent.
That's good.
Because I want good things for him. You know, that we flip it. We're doing a lot of parenting seminars on this content. We talk about stop, drop, and flip the thought.
Oh, that's
an easy way to remember it. And you said, stopping that thought and letting go of it, but then flipping it to something positive.
Stop, drop, and flip the thought. That'll preach. I find, we've been quoting different scriptures, and we probably know all the ones that we think of, like Philippians 4:6.
Yes.
Don't be anxious or don't worry about anything. That's sort of the breathe in.
Yes.
But in everything.
Pray, request, and the peace of God replaces it.
Yes.
Does that work for a parent in the middle of anxiety?
Yes.
It does.
I think it absolutely does.
Right.
And, what's interesting is if we keep doing that deep breathing, we can shrink our amygdala again.
Oh.
So we're actually resetting and creating new, calmer neural pathways. So this truth and what we know to be true scripturally also meets science. And it changes, it transforms us.
We'll We'll be back in just a second with a few thoughts from Anne about adult kids and worrying. But first, I remember my doctor telling me one time that stress and anxiety would drastically affect me in the physical realm if I didn't proactively deal with it, because I used to struggle a ton with anxiety. I still do, but it used to be a lot worse for me. There is legitimate and profound overlap between the worlds of the mind and the body. So when we're riddled with anxiety, when we're worried constantly, it's going to manifest in our physical deterioration. So taking the struggle to God is the absolute best thing we can do, amongst other practical tools that Sissy Goff has helped us with today. I'm Shelby Abbott, and you've been listening to Dave and Ann Wilson with Sissy Goff on Family Life Today. Sissy has written a book called The Worry-Free Parent, Living in Confidence so your kids can too. In a world right now of constant anxiety that infiltrates families, how can we offer our kids a beacon of hope? How can we experience hope and be equipped with practical tools to help break the cycle of worry in our lives? Well, this book talks about that and is enormous help if you're a parent who is prone to worry. This book is going to be our gift to you when you partner with us today at Family Life. You can get your copy right now with any donation that you make. Just simply go online to FamilyLifeToday.com and click on the Donate Now button at the top of the page. Or you can give us a call with your donation at 800-358-6329. Again, that number is 800, F as in family, L as in life, and then the word today. Or you could feel free to drop us a donation in the mail if you'd like. Our address is Family Life, 100 Lake Hart Drive, Orlando, Florida, 32832. All right, let's hear more from Anne about worry and parenting her adult children.
You would think that with adult kids, you'd stop worrying. Things are great. We don't need to worry anymore. I'm finding myself in a whole new phase of, because I have no control, now I'm worrying because I have nothing. My words, they mean nothing. And then I try to manipulate a situation. But I think that's really good of realizing there is a God in heaven who hears every prayer. As it says, he'll guard your heart. Isn't it interesting? Your heart and your mind in Christ Jesus. And I've come to that realization, like, I don't want to build that muscle, the negative, what is it? The amygdala?
Neural pathway. Yeah.
Again, to me, it's like building that muscle. Which one's stronger? And let's not build that one, but let's keep giving things over to Jesus.
Yes.
You know, many of us as parents really do struggle with constant anxiety about our kids. We're worried. And I've even heard mothers say, hey, I'm a mom. It's my job to worry. But is it? Is it your job to worry? We're going to talk tomorrow about building resilience and finding hope as we face our worries as parents. Sissy Goff will be back with Dave and Ann Wilson tomorrow to talk about just that. We hope you'll join us. On behalf of Dave and Ann Wilson, I'm Shelby Abbott. We'll see you back next time for another edition of Family Life Today. Family Life Today is a donor-supported production of Family Life, a crew ministry helping you pursue the relationships that matter most.